Hi, my name is Alexander Scapa, and I'm going to give a presentation on the history of computers. So I'm pretty sure all of you have either a laptop or a phone or some type of device, but we don't really think about how those devices have evolved over the years. So I'm here to talk about that. I'm going to talk about today the beginning of computers, the evolution of computers, and finally the start of personal computers. So in the beginning, we have Alan Turing. He's a British mathematician from the 30s and 40s that helped decipher the Enigma code that the Germans were using during World War II. Turing made a model called the Turing model, which is used for future computers like the Bombay and the ENIAC. The Bombay was a machine that, technically the first computer that was ever made by Alan Turing. It was used to decipher the Enigma code that the Germans were using during World War II to encrypt their messages and send it to their allies. The ENIAC was a project that Turing was working on with the US to calculate the artillery firing tables, which pretty much means that the US was calculating the trajectory of missiles that they were sending. And with the era of computers entering the 50s, there was a shift between vacuum tubes to silicon transistors. The first two computers that were made, especially the one with ENIAC, were using vacuum tubes. So pretty much what vacuum tubes do are that they either stop or let the flow of electrons, which could be thought of as a physical way to represent ones and zeros or binary. So now with silicon transistors being the new type of technology for computers, computers can become more compact and also have more computing power, because we can fit more silicon transistors into a computer now. Next, I'm going to fast forward into the Cold War, specifically the space race. During this era, still computers weren't used that much often. Women played a big role during the space race since they were the ones doing all the mathematical computations for NASA. Calculations that determined trajectory of shuttles were still done by humans. Tony Greshers from NASA writes, "Human capabilities were much more powerful for many tasks, including the rapid calculations needed for trajectory analysis and verification, as well as the graphing of data points on trajectories, which made a spacecraft's path easy to see." At the same time, there were also private companies like IBM that were starting to make their own computers. One of the most famous ones was the one made by IBM called the IBM System 360, which was the first computer with interchangeable software. So what this means is that different computer models can now talk to each other pretty much, and because every computer has different language, so the different language can now transfer into one computer and another. So with the System 360, the computer can pretty much take the information from another computer and use it on its own system and process information. Finally, by the late 60s, there was an idea by Doug Engelbart of something called a graphical unit interface. So this is what we know of as like Windows 10, Windows 7, Windows 11, the actual visual representation that we'd see on the screen. Before, computers were using command line interface, which is everything had to be either typed or put in manually through switches and gears. So with a graphical user interface, it becomes more user-friendly for people, for any normal citizen. So now we go into the 70s, and we see the first private company, making a computer with a graphical user interface, also called a GUI, in 1973. The computer was called the Zero Alto, using the OS system Alto Executive. Next, Apple made their own computer with a GUI in 1983 called the Apple Lisa using the operating system Lisa OS. And finally, in 1985, Microsoft comes out with their most famous GUI called the Windows 1, which then proceeds to make Windows XP, Windows Vista, Windows 7, Windows 10, and most recently Windows 11. By the 90s, the most important thing to know is that Google became the most famous search engine used. Before Google, we used the Alta Vista, Lycos, and Archies. The reason why Google became the most used search engine at this time is because it had a user-friendly interface. It was easy to search up things. And by the 2000s, personal computers become more accessible. Pretty much anyone has it by that time. By 2011, Apple has already made the iPhone, iPad, MacBooks, and many different versions of the iMac, which is their own take on personal computers. In conclusion, I think it's important to know who are the people who have been able to evolve the devices that we use now to what it is today, and it's important to recognize their accomplishments, because without them we wouldn't have the technology we have today. Thank you, and that's all for today.